Hey everyone, welcome to Two Car Bros. My name is Ryan, and today I'm going to show you exactly how to replace a CV axle for a 2008 Lexus RX350. So in this video, I'll show you how to do the driver's side, but the passenger side is very similar. It's not quite identical, but the process is identical. It just looks a little bit different because the CV axle is a little bit longer and has a carrier bearing, but I promise it is just as easy as I'm about to show you. This is totally something you could do at home on your own with jacks and jack stands and a couple of basic tools, and all the links for all of those things are down below in the description. So with all that way, let's jump in. So first thing I'm going to do is get some WD-40 or penetrating fluid, and I'm just going to hit these threads up because they've been on since factory and you know they're tight. After that's soaked for a few minutes, we can take a 30mm 12-point deep well socket, link down below in the description, and put it on there. And then we can try removing this nut, but as you can see, the whole assembly rotates, and you might be asking, well, what the heck do you do? Well, if you're alone like me, you grab a long pry bar like this and hold it against the studs, and then you can put some torque on it, like that. And then just keep rotating along. Eventually get loose enough where you can use an impact gun. Like that. And what you do with this nut is throw it into the trash. They are one-time use only. And what I like to do at this point is make sure that the CV axle is going to detach from the hub assembly. You can see this one is nice and loose. If this is like really hard, you can't even like push on it or anything, just grab a rubber mallet and give this some taps and it should break free. Maybe squirt some WD-40 in there, but this is perfect. And then come to the back side of the assembly, and we're going to focus on this steering tie rod here, and we can take the cotter pin off because we're going to need to remove this whole thing here from the assembly so we can get some swinging action, and just use some side cutters. You can even use a screwdriver to kind of pry it up if you're having trouble. And what I like to do is just watch your eyes, put some eye protection on, just cut that bit off, and then you can just remove the cotter pin very easily. That's the way I like to do it. And then I'm going to take some WD-40 and just hit those threads. There we go. And then I'm going to take a 17mm socket and remove that nut. Sometimes I'll leave it on like this if, like this one's pretty hard to get off. We're going to leave the castle nut on there, and then what we can do is take like a rubber mallet or a brass hammer, because I don't want to damage that castle nut. There we go. Just remove that the rest of the way. And then we can remove our steering tie rod. Nice. Actually just store that up in a way so it doesn't get in our way, and then we can move on. And this is kind of funny. Usually you just take the lower ball joint off of the lower control arm, but the way this is designed, it's not really possible to do that with the CV axle in the way. So you just remove these 3 17mm fasteners. Just like that. What I'm going to do next is take a long prying implement, and I'm just going to put it right here just to move the lower control arm off of this assembly here. I'm just going to pull on the lower control arm and push up with the hub assembly. Like that. Yeah, that's not bad at all. So what we need to do is pry the hub assembly out towards us while we grab the CV axle and move it towards the inside of the vehicle. Might be a little sticky on you. Just like that until it is free of the assembly. There we go. That looks better. So the hub assembly needs to move kind of rearward like this. It's okay, it's not going to fall or anything. Just push it out of the way like this, and you can get the CV axle in because it moves in just a smidge. And when we're taking this out, basically there's really no elegant way to do this. You just want to keep tugging on it until it breaks the seal like that. And sometimes it'll leak ATF, sometimes it won't. So just be prepared for both situations. So we're looking now is actually where the CV axle is married to the transmission, and I'm just going to keep pulling on it so you can see that separation, because they're actually fighting a little O-ring inside of there, actually fighting a little clip. There we go. That looks pretty good. So once we have that separation, the CV axle should be able to come out more of the way. Yeah, there we go. Now it's looking pretty good. So now we've defeated the clip that's inside of the transmission that actually holds the CV axle to the transmission. What we can do is just kind of wiggle it the rest of the way out. And then just guide it out of there. So here's our old unit on the lower bit of your screen, and here's our new unit. And you might notice, hey, this one's a lot longer. Well, that's because the actual CV part with all the bearings and whatnot that actually go in this housing have pulled out. Most likely happened when I pulled it out. Which is fine, but that shouldn't happen. You can see all the leakies, the boot's compromised, there's a bunch of fluid leaking out of it. It is just not acceptable for road use. It's slinging grease everywhere, it's making noise, all kinds of clunky sounds. So this is our new unit made by a company called Track Motive. It is part number TO-8217, and I will leave a link down below in the description. Just make sure that you get the right one for your vehicle. So when they say right hand, that means passenger, and they say left hand, that means driver. We're doing the driver today, so that's the one we have. So here's a tip. Here's the little clip that was fighting us earlier in the transmission. This is what you were fighting, trying to get this thing out. And you might think, oh, you know, I'm just going to make it so it's concentric and then try to put it in, and you know, sometimes that works and everything, but this is a nice trick I've learned, is take some oil dissolving racing grease, link down below in the description, and we're just going to dab it on there, and check this out. The grease is actually going to hold it in a position to where it's concentric and will go in and won't fall down and make it a pain in the neck to get this thing in. It actually makes it really easy. What I'm going to do is lubricate all the splines as well. And what you should do next is take some ATF, or I am going to use this oil dissolving grease, and I'm just going to skin everything. I'm just going to give it a nice skin so that way it doesn't start up dry on the seal. There we go, all greased up. Again, you could use ATF, but this thing's ready for install. What I'm going to do next is take some carburetor spray or brake clean, whatever floats your boat, and just spray it on that mating surface because it's probably dirty. We're just going to wipe that down with a shop towel so it's nice and clean and ready to receive our new CV axle. And I'm going to get some grease on the end of my fingertip, that oil dissolving grease, and I'm just going to apply it on here, or you can use ATF, no problem there. You just don't want this starting up dry and tearing. The inner seal as well, you'll feel it, there's like a rubber seal inside of here. That needs to be lubricated as well, and that looks pretty good. So now we can take our new CV axle, make sure that ring is nice and concentric with the splines, take the nut off of the hub side, and we can just feed that in. So then we can line up our CV axle with our transmission. Just line that in. You might need to rotate it a little bit to get the splines matched up. There we go. Seems like it's in its home. So this is what you're looking for. See how the dust shield is parallel with the surface of the transmission? That's what you need. If it's cockeyed or off to the side or something off, take it back out and redo it. You don't want to goober up the splines in there. So sending a CV axle home is one of the easiest parts of the job. You just use the CV axle as sort of a hammer. And don't go crazy on this, just give it some taps until you hear that sound and it's nice and solid, and you know the CV axle is in its home. I'll also show you another way you know it's in. So you're looking at where the CV axle actually attaches to the transmission, and we can see that the dust shield is perfectly mated up against the transmission. I've already cleaned the ATF off there, and we can just keep an eye on it. If no ATF leaks out, then we know it's in. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to grease these splines right here that go into the hub itself. You don't usually need to do this, but it makes your job just a little easier. If you live somewhere where it snows, or if you've noticed a lot of corrosion in here, go ahead and spray some carburetor spray on these splines and take a wire brush and just go to town. Go ahead and make sure these splines are nice and clean, because if there's any crud in there, it'll make installing the CV axle really difficult. So this is the fun part, what you're going to need to do, and sometimes a helper is nice to have here, is you're going to lift this up and over like this. At the same time, you're pushing the CV axle back and into the hub. It's a little tricky. It might take you a few tries, but keep at it and you'll get it. That was actually not too bad. So sometimes it'll be easy to get it into the hub, but then the splines won't line up, so you can just rotate the axle or the hub a little bit, and then put it in. You'll see it stick out just right there. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the nut on that came with our brand new CV axle. Always use the new nut that's provided. And I'm just going to put it on about that much because I just don't want the CV axle to fall out of the hub while I'm manipulating it. So getting the lower control arm back on is a little bit of a task. It's really helpful if you have somebody hanging on to the lower control arm as you maneuver this down. And then you can maneuver these studs into their homes. Ooh, like that. Yeah. So that's the way you need that to be. Sorry, I couldn't get the exact moment on camera. I kind of had to be in the way, you know, pulling down on this and pushing this inboard. And we can replace our nuts and our bolts. Bolt, singular. So this bolt won't quite reach, so what I'm gonna do is just use these two to kind of bring it closer to me. But I'm not tightening them all the way down just yet. I just want to get it so the threads can start on the bolt like that. On these guys, the torque spec is 94 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, that's okay. I would call this 2-arm tight. There we go. These have to be on pretty good. There we go, 94 on each and every one of those. So now we can take our steering tie rod and put it back in the knuckle. Just pull it down like that. Very good. Grab our castle nut. Oops. And spin that into place. And then we can just snug that down. Now, the torque spec is 36 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, that's quite all right. Just 1-arm tight is fine. There we go, 36, but the castle nut hasn't quite lined up. In an ideal world, it would line up with a hole, so just give it a little more until it lines up, or a little less, whichever way makes sense for you. Mine's almost there. That's perfect. It's a little tough to see, but right there is the hole that the cotter pin goes through, and you need the castle nut to line up perfectly with that so you can get the cotter pin through. Next, we can grab our replacement cotter pin, and it doesn't really come with the kit, but that's okay. If you're working on cars, you should just have a whole assortment of cotter pins. Link down below in the description to a whole kit. What you can do is just put that in there. All that's doing is preventing the castle nut from turning while you're driving, so you can just bend one leg fully around like that. Now there's no way that nut can ever come loose, and we can just snip off the other end. So what I'm going to do next is take the axle nut down just a touch with a 32mm socket. So now we can do the big job, which is tightening this nut down to 217 foot-pounds. I would call that really stinking tight. Definitely 2-arm tight if you don't have a torque wrench. This might be a 2-man job, so I'm going to do my best to do it by myself, but you never know. See, I've had the bar kind of wedged against the brake caliper. I'm hoping that's going to be enough. And I have my 32mm socket, and we're just going to try to muscle her out. Ugh. There we go. Oh, okay. 217 foot-pounds. Really tight. So next thing we need to do is do what's called staking. We need to take a chisel and put it right about here. Some people just do it in the middle. I like to do it on both sides of the valley here, and we're just going to divot that in so that way that nut can never ever come undone. Kind of doesn't look like much on camera, but I promise you there is a nice good size divot down here. It is nice and staked in. You can kind of see that it's nice and sucked in right here, so it's right in this groove, and this can't ever come loose by accident. So that's how to replace the CV axle on your 2008 Lexus RX350. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it's not that difficult. You really don't need to take this to a mechanic to have this done. This is something you are totally capable of doing. And if you have any questions, you can leave them down below in the comments and I'll do my best to get to them. Doing this repair yourself is saving you at least $300, if not more. I'm unsure how much Lexus would charge for this, but I can't imagine it is cheap. CV axles are one of those mechanic things that are easy to do, but they charge a lot of money for, kind of like brakes. Thank you so very much for watching. If you found this video helpful or interesting at all, please consider giving a like or even subscribing. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.